Hi TBM, I am so happy to share how I manifested my dream apartment with a yard and a washer dryer in New York, along with $35K to start my business. So a little background on me, I'm now an intuitive coach. I help women navigate their spiritual awakening, reclaim their power, and step into their gifts and talents. So a year ago, I'm so thankful now to think about where I am now as compared to then. But when I started Lacey's work in January, I was living with a roommate, and I was living with a roommate because my first business as a real estate agent, in my 20s, I built up a 6-figure business, and I tanked it during my spiritual awakening when I was really incapacitated, going through a lot of emotional disturbances in 2015. So I was paying down debt and working 2 jobs, my coaching business and my full-time job as a marketing director and at a wellness company. And so I really could not figure out how to get my business off the ground to generate enough income for me to be able to leave and exit my job. So I just decided, I need capital. I have to be able to start my business full time with runway, because I'm just not the type of person who's organized enough to be able to just do a side hustle and a full-time job and make it run. So at the beginning of the year, I started with inner child, and once I started with that, things started popping. My list started coming off the page, and I was totally shocked. And then I realized that my boss at work was my best trigger. Literally every day, something would come up with him that I could take through the DRE. And he really represented both my mom and my dad from childhood. And I realized, first of all, it was bad for me to be as triggered as I was at work, but that I could use all of it to help reprogram all of those painful memories that were just stored. So fortunately, unfortunately, I was kicked out of my apartment by that roommate who had a conniption fit I've never seen. And I had to move into a temporary place. And in this temporary place, I was still, in a 2-bedroom, but it was much more of a separate apartment, which is what I really wanted. My dog also is 10, and so there was extra motivation there because he has a hip problem. So I needed a 1st floor apartment with a yard. That was my intention. He's 11. I really want to just live in a place where he can be happy for the rest of his life. And so I lived in that place for 2 months, and then I moved to finally another 1-bedroom apartment. But I'm telling you, I had no place to live on a Thursday night, and I had to move out on Friday morning, and my friend called me out of the blue. I was praying, I was doing Lacey's work every day, and my friend called me out of the blue and had finally a 1-bedroom apartment for me to move into. That wasn't the last 1-bedroom apartment I moved into. I ended up being there for 6 weeks, and I realized I'm not doing shadow work. I had put it off till July, and I'd started Lacey's work in January. And so I pulled my bravery together, and I just dove into the work. And that's really when this apartment came through. My friend called me out of the blue, and she brought me to see it before it got on the market, and it was way below. It was within my price range. With a yard on the 1st floor in a better neighborhood than I thought it was going to be in, with a washer dryer, which was not even on my list. And just a lot of other things fell into place. It was like this. So that came in July of last year. And then 4 weeks later, after doing shadow work, is when I got fired from my job. And it was totally out of the blue, no feedback, no comments, but I did get a great severance check. And I had unemployment come in through the SEEP program, which is self-employment assistance program in New York. For anyone who's here in New York and gets fired, you want to take that program if you're starting a business, because you get a free business coach, you get a lot of support. And yeah, so in total, it came out to about 35 grand, which was 6 months of expenses covering this brand new apartment, which is the most expensive apartment that I've lived in New York. So, I mean, it's totally incredible. I would say the biggest thing for me that I had to clear was that, you know, my mother relationship, and it kept coming up over and over again with different healers that I would work with outside of Lacey's work, that like I had to forgive her. So my mom, I think in classical terms, many therapists have called her a sociopath. She has a lying disability is what I would call it. And for a long time, I just held on to so much anger against her. I was 24, she went to jail for fraud, and I so have a lot of money issues tied up with her, and I'm the oldest kid of three, and so I've really been affected by that. And what ended up happening is she ended up giving me the $2,500 deposit I needed to get into the apartment, and it was all part of that healing package that I had to go through and like allow her back in to a certain extent. And otherwise I haven't taken any money from parents since I was 24. I'm super independent. But it was like such a ping and such a download that I had to ask her to help me. And in doing so, it really has repaired our relationship, and we've built a level of trust again. I also am a trauma survivor, so that comes into play as well. And, I've done more unpacking of that since August, since I moved into this apartment. And that's been more outside of Lacey's work, doing EMDR with a therapist, but that's definitely been a good complement to all of this manifestation work. So I hope that helps someone. I hope that inspires you to just keep doing the work. Shadow work is now fun. It takes me a while to get through it, but understanding, and for me, it was like peeling away the layers of shadow attached to my parents and attached to my mother. Like, I'm very afraid of being a fraud, very afraid of lying to people, very afraid of like under delivering and overselling sort of thing. Because that's how I experienced my mother as a child. She started a lot of businesses that just collapsed underneath her. And my understanding of the whole thing now is so different. I just see her as a person who is flawed, and she had a horrible childhood herself, and this is her survival mechanism, just really getting in the way of my peace. And now I could just put it in that category as opposed to just throwing out the whole relationship. So that's very long-winded, but I hope, again, that helps you. Happy manifesting, TBM. Thank you so much for asking me to do this video, and I couldn't be more thankful or appreciative to be in my own apartment during these times when we're in quarantine. It brings me just so much peace, especially since boundaries and like privacy have been such a big issue for me in my life. So glad to have that cleared. Thank you very much.